I'm 75 now, and I can't remember anybody except the Queen being.
I know how deeply you, the entire nation, and I think I may say the whole world, sympathise with me in the irreparable loss we've all suffered.
Queen Camilla was already seated when the door clicked shut, and no one raised their voice, no argument, no dramatic exit. But according to palace insiders, when King Charles reportedly confirmed his final decision about her crown roll, the silence in that room did more damage than any headline ever could. Sources suggest a single sentence quietly rearranged the balance of power at the very top of the monarchy, and the woman who had allegedly spent decades fighting for acceptance suddenly faced a future far smaller than the one she believed had been promised. Before we go deeper, make sure to subscribe, because what reportedly happened next is a story the palace never wanted the public to see. Camilla, it is reported, did not react the way most people would expect. She kept her spine straight and her expression composed, though insiders suggest her hand tightened on the arm of the chair, as if that grip alone held her upright. Charles sat opposite her with a sealed briefing folder near his fingers, looking less like a monarch issuing a command and more like a husband carrying a weight he had already suffered through in private. The crown roll, meaning the duties and influence attached to her position beside the sovereign, had reportedly just been narrowed into plain and unmistakable words. None of this has been confirmed by the palace, and everything here should be understood as speculation rather than established fact. What sources describe is this: she would remain queen, but she would allegedly not hold expanded authority over future crown traditions, household patronage decisions, or the symbolic duties tied to the next reign. The royal household, meaning the private structure that manages palace staff, ceremonies, and public responsibilities, reportedly needed one clean line of authority before the monarchy stepped into its next chapter. Insiders suggest the phrase used inside that room was the final settlement, not a discussion, not a review, not something that might soften over a quiet dinner months later, and Camilla is said to have understood the coldness hidden inside those two small words. But the settlement, if the reports are accurate, was only the beginning. Because the real wound, sources suggest, waited behind the next set of palace doors, where she would allegedly discover who had supported the decision, who had stayed silent, and who had quietly made it impossible to reverse. And once she learned that second truth, insiders claim the loss of a title would feel like the smallest injury of all. Charles, sources suggest, no longer saw this as merely a painful family matter. He allegedly viewed the crown roll question as one of survival, because the institution reportedly needed clarity before the next era arrived. The monarchy could not afford confusion at its summit. Insiders claim the king feared that two centers of influence during future ceremonies would turn every gesture into a story, every seat into a question, every silence into a headline. The decision was reportedly made not because Camilla had failed him, but because the crown demanded order. Camilla, it is said, felt the cruelty of that logic more sharply than anyone. She allegedly believed her years beside Charles had earned her a lasting ceremonial place, especially after the storms she had weathered and the long, punishing road she had walked to rebuild her image before a suspicious public. A ceremonial roll was reportedly never decoration to her. It was said to be proof of acceptance, proof that she had finally become part of the story rather than a footnote to it. So when Charles allegedly limited that future, sources suggest she did not hear policy at all. She heard rejection. She heard the door of history quietly closing. William, insiders claim, carried a different kind of pain. He reportedly respected his father and knew Charles had defended Camilla at great personal cost across many difficult years. Yet he allegedly feared that an expanded role for her could complicate the future he and Catherine were expected to inherit. The future king, sources suggest, was not chasing a fight. He was trying to prevent one before it could ever begin. He understood, they claimed, that if the next reign started under blurred authority, Catherine would inherit a role already crowded by old promises and unfinished loyalties. Catherine, meanwhile, is said to have stayed calm, and it was that very stillness that reportedly unsettled Camilla most. The princess had allegedly seen enough palace pain to know exactly what softened language could do to a woman's life. And Camilla, sources suggest, noticed something that cut deeper than the decision itself. Catherine did not look surprised. The Queen allegedly realized in a single cold instant that her future had already been discussed in rooms she had never been invited into. So the question shifted. Was this truly about protocol, or was there a hidden moment the palace had buried until now? To understand why Charles reportedly acted, the story returns to one exchange that allegedly changed everything inside Windsor Chapel after a private remembrance service. The chapel, a royal place of worship used for deeply personal ceremonies, was meant to hold memory and grief. Instead, according to insiders, it became the place where a hidden conflict quietly took shape. Near the side aisle, in a low exchange few could hear, Camilla is said to have made one request too far, and Charles allegedly saw with sudden clarity that affection and authority could no longer share the same crown. She had entered that day, sources suggest, believing she needed only reassurance. but after the service she reportedly asked Charles to confirm her future ceremonial precedence, even beyond his own reign, and to protect it in written palace guidance during future ceremonies led by William himself. Charles, insiders claim, heard it very differently than she intended. She believed she was asking for security. He allegedly heard a request reaching quietly into William's future before either he or Catherine had fully stepped into it. Charles did not answer. He allegedly set his prayer book down with deliberate control, and that small gesture reportedly carried more weight than any refusal spoken aloud. William, standing nearby with Catherine, is said to have noticed his father's expression tighten. From that day, aides began preparing a private review, and the decision that later shattered Camilla reportedly became almost inevitable. When that review finally reached Charles, sources suggest Camilla demanded to hear the truth from him directly, with no advisor to translate the pain into polite protocol. The confrontation, insiders claim, happened behind closed doors, where marriage and monarchy finally collided. She asked whether loyalty had meant nothing. Charles did not answer at once, and the silence reportedly wounded her more than anger could have. At last, he said the monarchy could not be shaped around personal reassurance, and it was the gentleness in his voice that allegedly made it worse. There was no cruelty in it, only finality. Then, according to insiders, he revealed the truth beneath it all. William had not forced his hand, but the prince had reportedly made his position unmistakably clear. A future reign could not begin with confused authority. William had not shouted, he had simply drawn a line, and Charles had accepted it. None of this exchange has been confirmed by the palace and should be treated as dramatized speculation. Once the decision moved from quiet conversation into palace action, sources suggest the Queen discovered the cruel truth hidden inside careful royal wording. Symbolic limits rarely stay symbolic. They reportedly become closed doors, missing names, and reassigned meetings. The first sign came through a door Camilla fully expected to open. A meeting she expected to chair was quietly reassigned to officials working directly under Charles and William. She reportedly stood outside that briefing room for one long, painful moment and understood the message instantly. Her name had allegedly vanished from several future-facing ceremonial notes, while Catherine received a separate briefing soon afterward. The next era was already being built, and it was being built without her at its center. And the coldest moment, according to insiders, was still ahead, when Camilla and Catherine finally faced each other with no advisors and no cameras between them. Just two women, sources suggest, and the truth that the crown gives nothing without quietly taking something back. Camilla, it is said, had asked for the meeting herself. She allegedly told Catherine that being reduced by the palace felt like being judged all over again, like standing before a court that had never fully forgiven her. Catherine, according to insiders, listened without interrupting, then answered softly that the decision was not about humiliation, but about protecting a monarchy that had already wounded too many women. For one strange moment, sources suggest they were not rivals at all, but two women on different sides of the same relentless machine. Camilla then admitted a fear she had never confessed to Charles. She was afraid of disappearing from history once he was no longer the center of the crown. Catherine, insiders suggest, did not dismiss it. She reportedly revealed that she had urged William not to make the decision cruel, even as she agreed the future line had to be clear. The conversation did not restore the role, but it allegedly softened the silence before the storm broke. By the next morning, insiders claimed the palace could no longer keep the decision contained. A private matter had become a national spectacle, and the public divided sharply and loudly. Some voices spoke with sympathy, saying she had served long enough to deserve dignity. Others argued the monarchy needed one clear future built firmly around William and Catherine. Charles, sources suggest, watched the coverage in silence as commentators called his choice ruthless, necessary, and cold, sometimes all in the same breath. The palace, insiders claim, issued a brief statement emphasizing continuity, and its very shortness reportedly made everything feel more severe, more final. In the end, sources suggest the decision did not destroy Camilla. It reportedly revealed the limit of what love itself can protect inside a monarchy. Charles had given her dignity, status, and years of unwavering defense, but he could not give her the future crown at the expense of the next one. Instead of proof that her years beside Charles would live on, she received boundaries, not exile, not disgrace, but boundaries. And sometimes, inside palace walls, a boundary can wound almost as deeply as a ban. The story closes not with triumph, but with a hard royal truth, none of it confirmed by the palace. Camilla had not been destroyed, Charles had not been cruel for its own sake, William had not acted out of revenge, Catherine had not claimed any victory. Each of them lost something quietly, but the crown gained certainty. And in the House of Windsor, love may shape the journey, yet the crown, in the very end, always decides the ending. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.